Welcome to Aspire interview series. Today I'm talking to Mr. Wojciech Przybylski, head of Kraków Technology Park. Good morning, Wojciech.
Good morning, Łukasz.
Can we start with where we are? Can you tell us something about this place? What is it? What purposes does it serve? A few statistics, perhaps.
To make it short and plain, it's a startup hub, in fact. Mm-hmm. This building is dedicated mainly to startups working in ICT and everything which is linked around ICT.
Mm-hmm. Some statistics? How many startups do you have here now?
At the moment we have more than 70 ICT companies in this building. Mm-hmm. I would say 40 of them are startups, in the very meaning of this word.
What do you think about this word, the very word startup, in the context of Kraków? How vibrant is this community? There are a lot of events, meetups, meetings, all sorts of conferences.
Of course.
What's the impact of this community now internationally?
Okay, so
how serious is this discussion, in other words?
These are three separate questions, in fact. If you ask how vibrant it is, it's very vibrant because startups are good in networking and are good in PR stuff because it's one of the core competencies. If you ask what's the scale of this phenomenon in Kraków, is quite impressive. So it's definitely one of the two Polish biggest startup scenes, together with the capital, with Warsaw. If you ask me about the real impact of this company, of these companies, it varies, but we have more and more cases that we start to see a real economic impact of them because we have a group of, let's say, 10 leading Kraków-based startups that start sales at quite impressive scale.
Let me ask you a quick, tricky question then. Over the next decade, how would you assess the probability of a new company emerging which will become internationally recognized as a brand outside its target audience? Just like, doesn't matter if you drink Coca-Cola, you can recognize the name because it's a very powerful brand, or McDonald's and all these car brands. How likely do you think it is that we will have a brand like Skype or any other big name?
Decade is a lot of time concerning startups, so it's highly probable, but not necessarily in B2C business. It may happen in B2C.
Facebook is a decade, isn't it?
Of course, yeah, and it took even shorter time for Facebook to become really recognized. It may happen in Kraków with B2C, but it's like just a case or a game. It may happen most probably, I guess, in game development sector. Maybe this kind of startups is most likely to generate such a widely recognized startup, but it's only B2C. Most of the startups working in Kraków, as generally, are working in B2B field. And in B2B, I'm totally sure we'll have not one, but many of them that will be recognized, like in marketing automation, like IoT or other sectors, but it's not like, worldwide recognition that you will ask somebody in the street in Los Angeles and he will say, yes, I know this brand.
But it's a positive fact, isn't it, that we actually started with B2B and only proceed to B2C? What does it say to you?
That's true, and I'm not really sure if we proceed to B2C. It's just another bit of a business, and I think it's much harder to make it really scalable in B2C than in B2B. And all the cases I mentioned, so these 10 startups that are like on the right track for becoming maybe, if not unicorns, then becoming really recognizable business success cases, they are in fact all located in B2B area. Yeah.
What would you say is the missing ingredient, if we can call it that way? Because if we look at the most successful startups on the planet, most of them have very, very simple ideas behind. Like Facebook is the most obvious example, but even if you look at the story of Elon Musk, he made his first money co-founding PayPal, right? PayPal, which is a very simple idea. If you look at Airbnb, which I'm told is now worth much more than the entire Hilton chain, it's a very, very simple idea. If you look at some of the educational projects, like Khan Academy on the internet, all these ideas started sometimes by accident, sometimes with a very simple idea. So what's the missing ingredient? Is it psychological? Is it funding? Is it what?
In fact, the question you try to raise is much more about sociology than about like hard economy, I guess. And it's a question about the basic needs of the humanity. And in fact, what startups give and what IT gives is like enhancing the coverage of some needs that are not new. And many startups try to invent some new needs, new desires, and it's for sure the case in creative industry, for example, with game dev, animation, and so on.
But even beacons, I suppose, right?
Beacons maybe too, but in fact, the most probably use cases of beacons are making some typical life functions like buying something or going to a museum or whatever, much more comfortable with higher user experience or something like that. Yeah, you are not creating new needs with beacons. Yeah, you are just doing something better. Yeah, you may make a better exhibition or make your shop working in a more efficient way. Yeah.
Speaking of a city's ability to differentiate itself, make itself look innovative and original, can you think of any city, not only in Poland but worldwide, that really impressed you in that respect over the last few years?
I guess there are quite many cases of such cities. I'm shortly after a stay in US and I'm really impressed by Boston, for example. In Europe, I'm really impressed by Barcelona. I felt totally in love with Helsinki, but also, for example, with Tallinn, which is a much more interesting case for Kraków because it's a Central and Eastern European city which managed in like 20 years to become one of the leaders in innovation, especially concerning smart city issues and e-governance issues.
Mm-hmm. Aspire represents over 180 of the biggest companies present in Kraków. And it's a bit of an accident, this entire story of this industry of the IT and business services in Kraków, because
that's true. Yeah.
In fact it started more or less 15 years ago in earnest. But only 6 years ago, there were less than 16,000 people in the industry. Now there are over 60,000 people. This growth is really strong, 20% roughly every year for the last 6 years. And we've been number one in Europe for the last 3 years, according to Tollens. Do you think this growth of more or less single industry is a positive trend for Kraków and Małopolska, or do you see any potential risks attached to it?
Of course, both. So it is very positive, but there are some potential risks as long as it stays very focused on financial services. Yeah.
Would you like it to stay focused on financial services?
I wouldn't like it to stay focused on financial services. I would like it to specialize more and more in financial services, but I'd like it to grow both in ITO matters but also in other services and in other businesses. Yeah. So what happened with BPO? It is maybe something not really planned, at least not really planned by the public administration in Kraków, but it's not a total coincidence because the cause why it happened is mainly because of the quality of higher education in Kraków, which is high, and is a fact. And these are thousands of people who are alumni of universities and leave the universities every year, and it's something that allows the sector still to grow. Now the shift should be to build around this core of hard businesses and the 60,000 people doing some more and more complicated services to their mother companies somewhere in the world, to build around it a community of tech-oriented companies, not only startups, also larger companies, and to make this possible synergy between BPO sector and startups and other tech companies happen, which won't be easy, but I believe it's possible.
If you look at all the most important institutions, hubs, all the agendas and places which actually somehow affect topics such as innovations, technology, economic growth of the city, where do you see potential cooperation gaps between, say, the level of the voivodeship, the level of the city, the level of institutions such as KPT? In other words, what could be improved from your perspective? Because if you look at this massive industry of 60,000 employees, what could this industry perhaps do for the city?
I'm sure something that we lack is still a better interface between this industry and the surroundings. Yeah? It really happened that way that the whole BPO sector, it emerged a bit parallel to the, let's say, more traditional economic life of the city of Kraków. I know that there are many links. I know Aspire works on these links, but I'm not really sure if there is a working interface between the large companies and the startups itself. Yeah? Maybe KTP is a place both sides could meet, I believe so because some of our customers, a special economic zone, are at the same time members of Aspire. Maybe it's possible, but it's also a question of how far the companies working in BPO or even in ITO are flexible and how far they are making decisions here in Kraków and not somewhere in the world, which is not a total obstacle, but it makes it a bit more difficult.
If you were to focus only on the positive changes that this industry has created in the city, what would you list first?
It's only because of this industry, Kraków is no longer one of the poorest big cities in Poland, really. So it really, without BPO, Kraków would be a poor city with huge financial problems also in public finances. Yeah? Because of, thanks to BPO sector, the city became like a new economic drive, which is, I guess, the most important thing that happened in Kraków in the last 20 years in the economy. In fact, there are two phenomena. One is IT, generally speaking, and the second one is BPO, and everything driven by Aspire, and I really mean it that much. Nothing more interesting happened in the economy, looking at the large numbers. And it is a huge chance. We just need now to like a bit diversify the success.
Looking a bit to the future, can you think of an industry that you would really like to see grow in Kraków as a logical next step? We have seen countless companies now who came to Kraków, say 3, 4, 5 years ago, originally wanting to set up a center with maximum 100 employees, and over time, over the past years, they discovered that they want to take over more and more complex processes. They see they have the skill base, as they call it, so they keep absorbing more and more business into Kraków. From your perspective, just to leverage, as they call it, or to use the synergies of different processes on the market, what would you do next from the perspective of
I guess
city?
there are two most probable areas of growth. The first is hard tech and all engineering companies, because Kraków is not only good, so Kraków-based universities are not only good in IT education, IT engineers, we are also good in like mechatronics, electronics, robotics, and all the hard tech stuff. And there is still a huge potential growth in that area, both like acquiring R&D centers of international companies coming to Kraków and building up our own companies as EC Group, for instance. And the second area, the second growth potential is in creative sector. Because Kraków is not only good like in engineering and all the universities, AGH and Jagiellonian University and Kraków University of Technology, we are also good in everything which is linked with like design, art, culture-oriented studies. And the mixture of these competences is creative sector. So there is still a huge growth potential in game development, in animation, in multimedia, in design as such, architecture, and everything which is combined with it.
Just like in any relationship, there are two basic ways to attract investors. One is passive, the other one is active. The passive being that investors just come and take a look at the city just like they would look at, say, 5, 6 cities in Central and Eastern Europe and decide which one fits them best, or their purposes or goals. The other is active, that you actually deliberately try to build a certain profile for the city. Clearly, Kraków has had a success story in the passive aspect. What could be done in the active? Do you think the city is successful in deliberately, proactively obtaining the types of investors it's really interested in getting?
Yeah, I think that we are at the very point we may start thinking that way. Yeah, so it's no longer the case that we should be.
What do you mean, start thinking that way? Isn't it a bit late to start thinking that way?
I do not want to be too critical and too honest. I try to be a bit diplomatic as far as I can. I think there was a time in Kraków when Kraków should have been active all the time and seeking for every possible investor. I think now at the very moment we are already able to make it a bit like quality oriented, because of the structure of Kraków economy and the competences that are now available at the market, at the labor market. So I strongly believe Kraków should be much more active. On one hand, like diversifying a bit this very positive image of a BPO-oriented city and Kraków should be saying much more actively, okay, we love BPO, but simple financial services are no longer something that interests us the most, yeah? But at the other side, we can actively start looking for very hard, high competence-oriented R&D investments, and it's something that we try to do at KTP, but of course, you can't like build many parallel images of the city, so it must be like a combined effort of the city of Kraków as such, of the regional authorities and institutions like KTP, of course, all together.
Let me try and make it a little bit more difficult for you. Imagine you're the mayor of the city.
No, it's not easy to imagine.
It's not easy to imagine. Suppose you have this job, this responsibility. What would be, looking at all those relationships between major stakeholders which affect the reputation of the city, what would be like the top 3 things you would address first on a priority basis? That's a tough one, I know.
It's a tough one, but you know, I do not want to be too critical towards the image of Kraków that combines the touristic attractivity of the city and the cultural attractivity of the city, because it is highly important also concerning business promotion, because
Obviously.
being attractive in that matters is also attractive concerning like inviting people from business fields. But I think
But development of innovations, technology, economy doesn't harm culture, does it? The other way around.
It doesn't harm, but it's just the matter of what's more important in the image and what do you want to promote most. And I think that Kraków is now somewhere at the point that we are trying to incorporate this aspects of innovativeness to the general image of city, which is still mostly in areas of tourism, culture, like monuments and everything. And I would do it the total opposite way. I would say Kraków is the Central and Eastern European hub of innovative business that is additionally very attractive because it's a nice city and wonderful place to live, and we have great cultural festivals. Yeah.
So you're talking about a shift in reputation or focus on aspects of reputation. And there's
A total shift, yeah.
There is this discussion of smog in the city or air quality in the city. On the one hand, lots and lots of people, myself included, love this city, about different aspects of living in this city. But there is, of course, this debate.
It is an objective problem, of course. Yeah.
There is this debate that many of us actually read articles in international press about air quality, different blogs of people coming to Kraków, especially in winter, because this problem is no longer as painful for the inhabitants over spring, summer, autumn, but in winter people tend to complain a lot.
Yeah,
Do you think this is being addressed the way it should be?
I do not have the full scope, I guess. I'm not following all the international media, but I think it's no longer possible like to act as nothing happened. Yeah, everybody knows.
Do you think that's the way we're acting?
I think a bit, yes. So we try like, it is sometimes a good attitude in PR, like just not to touch the difficult problem, because touching it in any sense makes it even larger and louder. Yeah? I think it's too late for such an attitude. It's just everybody knows that there is a smog problem in Kraków. And now maybe it will be a paradox, but I would address it in a much more aggressive way. So make a lot of actions showing what is Kraków doing with smog on real facts, like the changing all the coal heating and enlarging the limited mobility zone in the city of this, in the center of the city, and so on. But at the other hand, I would try to do it a little bit more as Smogaton does it, an initiative that is trying like to acquire startups for the fight with smog, and to show that Kraków may be one of the leading cities that is using technology to fight with air pollution.
So ironically, one could say that this problem of smog is one of the proofs that Kraków is a smart city now, because the bottom-up movement, including startups and technology companies, have become so annoyed with this issue that they have taken action, which shows that we have increasingly active social activism.
You have told it in a much better way, and I want to believe it sounds reasonable and it's easy to defend, also outside of the city, yes.
Is there anything you would like to focus on? Any data, statistics, information you would like to share? Think about Aspire.
I'd only like to say that Of course, it depends on the economic model BPO companies are working in, but in many cases, KTP, with its special economic zone offer, but also with the very tech-oriented community, not only startups around KTP, is a perfect place to start your business in Kraków. Yeah, to offer you soft landing services, to offer public aid, and to help the companies come to Kraków.
How about cooperation between the startup community and the large international business in the city? Do you think this has already reached some kind of critical mass, or the two communities are yet to understand the potential benefits of cooperation?
I think it has not reached its critical mass yet, but it's on a good path to do so. There are cases and aisles of such cooperation. I believe KTP is one of them. We try to do it to link startups both with larger Polish and international companies, more and more. It happens for sure in Hubraum, so the accelerator run by Deutsche Telekom. It happens in a couple of big business events, including Impact Conference. So there are many good cases, but we are still quite long way before the critical mass will be reached. Yeah.
Do you think this industry has some kind of problem with reputation, not because of anything that happened in Kraków, but because of the fact that in a typical Polish mind, so to say, outsourcing is not necessarily a positive word. The early associations with the word reach back to East Asia and companies manufacturing shoes for Nike, etc., etc. So we have negative associations about the word, and we're not really talking about this industry that much anymore in Kraków.
I'm not sure if it's that bad. So I'm sure this kind of narration was present here some 10 years ago, when the BPO companies started to grow that fast, and this fears that they are easy to move and that they will go to India or somewhere is highly probable. It hasn't happened.
Come on, wait. How about the Voice of Mordor, which is an official title of the bulletin in Warsaw for the location where all the outsourcing companies are located?
But
we don't have this problem because we're scattered across the city.
But it's about like corpos and working in such business districts, and these are problems that are present everywhere. Yeah, it's not something typical for Warsaw, neither for Kraków. I think the general image of BPO in Kraków is much better now than it was 10 years ago, because the companies not only did not go somewhere, they are still growing larger and larger, and also the competences they look for at the labor market are higher and higher. Yeah? So everybody is already used to, I believe so, I think so, is used to saying, okay, it was maybe a bit risky, but in fact it appears to be in a huge scale a positive phenomena for Krakow's economy. Yeah? Maybe in some cases with people who look at the economy in a more structured way, this fear, this risk of too high specialization and concentration only on BPO, on financial BPO, is already present, but there are also a lot of projects happening that show it's changing now. Yeah? And even the sector diversifies to more advanced financial services, to human resources services, to ITO and other stuff. Yeah.
Of course, all of those companies are focused on their core business in Kraków. Do you think they should do something jointly to improve this image even more? In the sense that we all know that it's a relatively well-paid industry, so to say. It's becoming more sophisticated. Some people even make references to the market already becoming the employees' market as opposed to employers' market, which is controversial in its own right. Do you think something could be done to show this industry in more favorable terms? You made references to
Honestly,
PR, but
I don't really think it's really necessary, because what I get from the market, what I get from the market when I talk to young people, their image of BPO is positive. Yeah, they know it's a hard work. They know that at the beginning it may be a bit boring, but at the same time they know they will learn a lot, they will earn good money, and the overall image of the sector is positive. For me, I have even a problem and my interests are a bit contradictory in this case, because I meet too many young people who, in my opinion, could found their own startups, for example, but they do not want to do it because they know that they have a good path going to one of the BPO companies, yeah? So in this case, I would even like maybe not to make the image of BPO worse, but to make the image of startup community better, yeah? It's a much bigger problem from my point of view.
Now, when you think about it, when you graduate from a university and you want to set up your own startup eventually, would you agree that it's actually a good decision to spend a year or two in a corporate environment?
Absolutely.
Because that's where you actually learn if you're good at teamwork, if you're a potential leader,
Maybe
if you
even
can
not
manage a
one
project,
or two, but 5
how
years.
you handle stress. So would you agree that all these skills are understressed in the sense that people who go straight from university, which I believe is the time when very few people know what they want to do in life?
Yeah,
Is that the case?
I totally agree. I wouldn't say 1 or 2 years, I would say from 3 to 5 years. And as we observe a very fast growing level and potential of the startups we have in our incubator or accelerators, it's mainly because like 5 or 8 years ago, most of the startups were launched by people directly after finishing their higher education. Now, more and more of them are launched directly, as you said, by people who worked for 5 years in a large company, in some cases in other startup, but many in large companies. It may be an IT dedicating company, it may be BPO, and with this experience, they launched their first companies. And it's a much better way to do that.
So
and
it's
I
an
really mean it,
international skill lab, you could say, for those young people.
Of course.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Łukasz. It's been a pleasure for me too.